not go in there and people do not have a preconceived notion or an install base. And guess what? Semantic is saying, oh, we'll have that. That's in the next version. You know, McAfee's like, oh, we have that. We just picked up a small little company for 20 million, so we're going to do that now. But after a while, the customers have not seen the solutions. The attacks keep happening, and now these customers are falling one by one. Big customers. So there, it's been a timing thing. But it is both journeys are hard because Vericode's creating a market. You're evangelizing and educating. That's difficult. You go to tell people about application security and why this is important, how they do this way. Sometimes you get a blank stare. With bit 9, you're going and changing the subnet, and you're challenging an installed base. They're both difficult. From our estimation, they were both huge markets to go after.
So I know Anton's been waiting patiently.
Can I just do one really quick follow-on? Which is that the other thing that both of those companies in particular have in common is what they do is really hard to do. Technically, very difficult to do. Very difficult to get it right. It took a lot longer than anybody in the company or anybody around the board table expected in order to pull that off technically.
And expensive.
And you know what? That's a really good thing. Right? That's a really good thing, because to your point, why wouldn't the big guys just do it? Of course they will. Right? But they will do it, they will stumble, they will fall, they will pick themselves up, they will try it again, and that creates a really interesting environment when all of a sudden, it gets really serious and they have to say, we have to get this thing done right.
Anton?
So quick question. Would you guys favor a technology that sells to enterprises over the one that sells to SMBs when you fund? Or would you just look in general holistically at the business plan and stuff? So is there any kind of inherent bias that enterprise stuff would sell better, would earn more money, that type of stuff? Or not?
So I can chime in really quick on that. So traditionally, the conventional wisdom has been that the SMB is just harder to reach. But having said that, there's new and interesting ways, of new and interesting channels to reach them that have opened up. And there's definitely by far the interesting part of a lot of these issues is that the SMB market in many cases is completely a greenfield opportunity. So you don't have to compete with sort of necessarily any incumbents. You can sort of creatively craft your value proposition specifically for the SMB, rather than saying we'll make your infrastructure safer and plug into XYZ infrastructures that are already in place, as might be the case with a large enterprise. You can basically go in and say, this is the threat. This is why you need us, and this is how you can get onboarded really quickly. And I mean, just the attractiveness of the greenfield, the fact that it's a greenfield opportunity is definitely quite attractive. Having said that, I mean, trying to reach them is definitely a big battle, and especially in security, as somebody just mentioned, 2 or 3 companies sort of own all the channels. So you have to really kind of be creative. But broadly speaking, you look at Longworth, we don't necessarily have a bias towards one or the other. It all really depends in the context of the deal, whether not only the go-to-market strategy makes sense for that particular class of customer, but also whether the team has the right DNA to go after those particular things. I mean, for example, if we run into a team that has basically spent most of their careers in large enterprises with sort of large, expensive direct sales models, and now they're out to create some kind of tool which needs to be self-service, downloaded off the web, and just kind of self-installed, coupled with very sort of web-savvy marketing. I mean, there's a disconnect there. We don't necessarily, we may have a hard time getting convinced that the team has the right DNA to go after the market strategy that it's proposing. So basically, I would say, in summary, it's pretty situational, depends on the deal.
I think the SMB space is really interesting, and I do think it's greenfield. I think what I find is, on the SMB side, it's more about business model innovation. You better know how to get to those customers in a very efficient, cheap way. Take, if anybody knows Acronis, which is a company that does disaster recovery. I mean, they licensed $30,000 worth of software and then they just figured out how to boiler room, this is the model. You don't call customers that don't look like this, rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And that's the model a lot of time with SMBs. It is self-service, it's an upsell, with telephone. I mean, the guys from Viewfinity that Longworth backed, they did a company called Exosoft, which was exactly that. Didn't have a single direct selling body in the company. And I think on the SMB side, that is what you have to figure out, is how to manage that funnel from the front end to getting customers through to the self-service, to the upsell, to the telesales, to everything. And it's a math model that makes sense. And then I think on the enterprise, I do think it is more around innovation at a technology level than, sure there's the business model, the cloud stuff, but I do think the difference that we see is on the SMB side, it's much more about the business model and the customer acquisition.
So I'm not sure when they're going to cut us off, but I want to throw a Molotov cocktail, and I also want to pull back in our contest here. But a few of us in the room have been in a series of debates about PCI or PCI and its facsimiles and copies, and we've been talking about, is PCI the No Child Left Behind Act for security? And what we're seeing is, out of those 70 markets I mentioned, about 8 of those categories are going to get you fined if you don't do them. So it's kind of a suck hole of time and budget. And those categories are fine, but it's distributing the economics of the system differently. Is that going to commoditize this space? Is it going to stabilize this space? Is this a good thing or a bad thing? In general, we've basically found that it was a godsend during the bad economy because it buoyed certain categories of spending. But we're also concerned because some of the more innovative folks that are actually handling state-sponsored attacks or advanced things like APTs. Oh, by the way, every time you say APT, God kills a kitten. But some of these more advanced threats, these innovators had a very, very tough 2009 because they were considered discretionary. So the Molotov cocktail is a compliance culture a good thing, a bad thing, and how do we protect against it misdirecting innovative VC dollars? Anyone? The quiet participant?
Well, I think there's feedback loops to this. So in a recessionary time, the innovators that are most out on the fringe will tend to lose because that seems to be faraway benefits, and you will fall back to these regulated spaces that are requirements. So everybody will kind of retreat to the bare minimum, and that will tend to hurt the innovators. But what that also means is that the innovative groups at bigger companies tend to be shed as they seek profit high ground, and they try to get rid of sort of innovative products and services that might still be 5 years from producing, or 2 or 3 years from producing profits. And that pours more innovators back into the system. And that creates the next feedback loop where you now have many, many, many innovators that are focused on the fringe that don't have a lot to do except focus on the fringe and work together and innovate and come up with the next big thing. And so then you have this big ball of innovation that comes back into the system at the end of the recession, and everybody's looking around going, wait, where'd all my innovators go? Oh yeah, we laid them off. Now suddenly I need to buy that stuff. So I think there are these sort of looping, whirling kind of effects at play that are hard to predict, but I would say it's about time for the innovators on the fringe to sort of pick up and win over the next couple of years as people start to make more profit and look to acquire those innovators.
So first, a comment on PCI. Right? It does more harm than good because companies that somehow magically achieve PCI, which is basically stumble across the room and do almost nothing, feel some false sense of security. So that's the first thing that's wrong with PCI. The second thing is, shame on any company who actually has a really legitimate solution that's either going to solve a big pain point, save a company money, provide them with a significantly higher level of security, and do so in a game-changing sort of way, who can't sit across the table from a customer and explain to them how they will be advantaged in terms of every regulation that they are trying to achieve, regardless of whether or not you are specifically written into PCI. And there's very few companies that aren't. Right? I mean, you can, there really aren't that many companies at the end of the day, that, can rely solely and exclusively by saying, well, come with us and you check PCI. So I think that, the whole thing is a bit of a fallacy. I think it's just incumbent on great entrepreneurs to be able to weave compliance into a big part of their value proposition. If you are a security entrepreneur and you do not have a good compliance message, you know, as part of your offering and your message, then, you know, you're going to have a problem. Because it's not just PCI, it's compliance in general.